One of the most common things I hear from people is this: I want to start a business, but I don't have money. And every time I hear that, I can't help but smile, because I used to say the same thing. I thought capital was everything. I thought money was the door, the key, and the gatekeeper to success. But over time, I realized something shocking. You don't need capital to start, you need awareness. Most people think starting a business is about having everything ready first. The money, the office, the papers, the logo, the perfect plan. But that mindset is the very thing that keeps them broke. Because the truth is, money doesn't start businesses. Ideas, people, and action do. When I was just starting out, I didn't have investors. I didn't have savings. I didn't even know where to get a business permit. But what I had was something more valuable. The awareness that I already had something in my hands that others needed. That awareness is what most people miss. They wait for money, while the opportunity is already waiting for them to move. You see, when people say they don't have capital, what they really mean is they don't have clarity. Because money follows movement. It doesn't come before it. The moment you take one step forward, doors begin to open. Not because you forced them, but because you became aligned with motion. I learned this not from books, but from experience. I used to think I needed a big idea or a huge investor. But when I looked around, I realized my parents already had a small bread delivery business. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it was working. The problem was, I didn't value it because it looked too ordinary. I thought, there's no money here. But that's what blindness looks like. You're surrounded by opportunity, but unaware of it. It wasn't until I became aware of what was already in front of me that everything started to shift. I took what we already had, bread delivery, and brought it online. Suddenly, what used to be just a local business started reaching people all over the country. That's when I learned one of the biggest lessons in business. You don't grow by starting big. You grow by starting where you are. The reason most people don't start is because they think too big too soon. They want the office before they have the customer. They want a company name before they even have an offer. They want a website before they've made their first sale. But business doesn't work that way. It's not about how much you have, it's about how much you can do with what you have. And I want you to understand this clearly. Money is not the seed of business, movement is. Capital will always chase courage. Every great business begins with a simple decision to act despite the lack of resources. Even in the Bible, there's a pattern to this. Before God gave provision, he always required movement. Moses had to lift his staff before the sea parted. The widow had to pour her last oil before it multiplied. Peter had to cast his net again before he caught anything. None of them started with abundance. They started with faith. And faith revealed what was already there. That's what business is like. You're not creating something from nothing. You're revealing what's already been created. You're aligning yourself with abundance, not chasing after it. So if you've been saying, I'll start when I have money, this is your wake-up call. Because waiting for capital is like waiting for a perfect wave that never comes. The wave isn't coming. You have to create the current by moving first. I'm not saying you don't need money. I'm saying money is not the first thing you need. What you need is awareness. Awareness of what's in your hands. Awareness of who you can serve. And awareness of how far your faith can stretch. And once that awareness grows, something amazing happens. You begin to see capital everywhere. You realize that your skills are capital. Your relationships are capital. Your time, your ideas, your energy. They're all forms of capital that can be multiplied. So in this video, I want to share with you how to start a business without capital. Not by waiting for what you don't have, but by awakening to what you already do. Because the truth is, you're not broke. You're just unaware. And when awareness comes, everything changes. When I finally understood that starting a business without capital wasn't about the absence of money, but the presence of awareness, it changed everything. Because the truth is, most people are not broke. They're blind. They don't see what they already have, and so they assume they have nothing. You can't use what you can't see. That's the real issue. And I've noticed that the biggest reason people never start is not lack of capital. It's lack of vision. When you start looking at life differently, you begin to notice that abundance is hidden in plain sight. The phone in your hand, the people you know, the skill you've ignored, the small opportunities around you, they're all forms of capital waiting to be activated. You don't need to get capital, you need to recognize it. Think about it. Every successful business didn't start from money. It started from someone's idea, someone's skill, or someone's need that another person decided to solve. The money came after. When I looked back at my own, realized that my biggest shift happened when I stopped focusing on what I lacked and started focusing on what I had. My parents had a small bread delivery business. It wasn't much, but it was something real. Before, I would have ignored it because it looked too simple. But when my mindset changed, I started seeing it differently. It wasn't just bread. It was a system, a product, and a story people could connect with. Once you start seeing what's already available to you, creativity takes over. Awareness turns into ideas. Ideas turn into small steps, and those steps turn into income. The more you see, the more you can do. That's why awareness is more valuable than capital. It multiplies everything you touch. I'll give you an example. There are people who say, if only I had 100,000 pesos, I could start my business. But here's the truth. Even if you gave them that money today, they'd still lose it. Why? Because their mindset hasn't changed. They still think like someone waiting for opportunity, not someone creating it. Money without awareness is waste. But awareness without money will eventually attract it. When you become aware, you start asking better questions. Instead of where can I get capital, you start asking, what do I already have that can create value? Those questions are powerful because they shift your brain from scarcity to creativity. That's how I started using technology. I had no budget for marketing, but I had a phone, internet access, and time. I started taking pictures of our bread, sharing them online, and posting stories about how we bake and deliver. People started responding, not because the pictures were perfect, but because the story was real. That's how awareness works. It turns ordinary things into opportunities. The moment you stop saying I can't and start saying, how can I? Your awareness opens up. You begin to see what God already placed around you. Even biblically, this is consistent. In Genesis, before man existed, God already provided everything: food, land, animals, air, and light. Nothing was missing. Man's job was not to create new resources, but to use what was already created. That's still true today. You don't need to wait for God to give you capital. He already gave it to you. It's inside your gifts, your network, and your ability to create. The only missing part is awareness. Once you have that awareness, everything starts to connect. The ideas that seemed impossible before start making sense. The people you ignored before suddenly become opportunities for collaboration. The same environment that once felt limited now feels abundant. So when someone says, I can't start, I don't have money, I tell them, start anyway. Because if you can't start with nothing, you won't be able to handle something. Starting small trains you to be creative. It teaches you how to maximize every resource. It builds discipline. And most importantly, it builds identity, the kind of mindset that attracts more opportunities. I learned that when you start from awareness, not capital, your journey becomes unstoppable. Because while others wait for resources, you're already building. While others complain about what's missing, you're already learning how to multiply what's available. The secret isn't money, it's movement. The secret isn't funding, it's faith. The secret isn't having everything, it's realizing you already do. And once that awareness grows in you, there's no such thing as starting without capital. Because everything you need to start was never outside, it was always within. The biggest transformation happens when you shift your mindset from scarcity to stewardship, from asking, why don't I have enough, to asking, what can I do with what I already have? Because scarcity makes you blind, but stewardship makes you creative. Scarcity says, I don't have enough to start. Stewardship says, I'll start with what I have and I'll multiply it. That was the moment my business and my life began to change. When I stopped complaining about not having money, I started noticing the resources already around me. I had time. I had skills. I had a small community who trusted me. And most importantly, I had an idea that could solve a problem. See, people often think abundance is about having more. But real abundance begins when you know how to handle less. God never gives you more if you can't manage little. Because if you waste a little, you'll also waste a lot. That's not punishment. It's a principle. When I started our bread business online, I had almost nothing. No capital, no tools, no fancy branding. But I treated that small thing as if it were already big. I didn't see it as just bread. I saw it as a system that could grow. That mindset created momentum. I became more disciplined. I studied marketing. I learned to write better. I learned to sell without sounding like I was selling. And slowly, something powerful started to happen. That small thing became a business that earned 6 figures monthly. But not because I found a secret strategy, because I started acting like a steward. A steward doesn't wait. A steward doesn't complain. A steward builds, protects, and multiplies what's already given. The Bible says in Luke 16:10, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." That verse hit me deeply, because I realized I wasn't being tested by my lack of money. I was being tested by my attitude toward what I already had. That's the hidden rule of entrepreneurship. Your business doesn't grow faster than your identity. You can't hold abundance with a scarcity mindset. When I was still thinking like someone who didn't have enough, I made decisions based on fear. I said yes to wrong people. I joined trends that didn't fit me. I tried to copy others because I thought their success formula would work for me. But when I started thinking like a steward, I stopped chasing and started building. I focused on developing mastery instead of chasing miracles. Scarcity always looks outward. It blames the government, the market, the situation. But stewardship looks inward. It asks, how can I serve better? How can I create better? How can I maximize this? And when you start doing that, your energy changes. Your words change. The way people see you changes. Suddenly, doors open. Not because luck found you, but because you became ready for what was already waiting. Remember the parable of the talents? The servant who hid his coin wasn't punished because he didn't have much. He was punished because he didn't use what he had. The master said you should have at least put it to work. And that's the same message life gives you every day. If you don't use it, you lose it. So the real question isn't, how do I start a business without capital? It's how can I become a better steward of what I already have? Maybe your capital is your phone. Maybe it's your skill in talking to people. Maybe it's your connections. Maybe it's your time. If you use those intentionally, they'll create more capital than you think. I've seen this again and again. People who act on little always end up with more. People who wait for more before acting always stay stuck. The truth is, scarcity and stewardship are both mindsets, but they produce completely different outcomes. Scarcity drains your energy. Stewardship multiplies it. Scarcity sees obstacles. Stewardship sees raw materials. Scarcity waits for opportunity. Stewardship creates it. And here's something I've learned. God never gives you a finished blessing. He gives you seeds. It's your job to plant, nurture, and multiply them. That's what stewardship is all about. Every big business today started from someone who stewarded something small. A laptop, a kitchen table, an idea scribbled on paper. That's all they had, but they didn't treat it casually. They protected it, worked on it, improved it, and eventually, it grew. So, if you're listening to this and you feel like you have nothing, look again. You're not empty. You're equipped. You just need awareness to see what's already in your hand and stewardship to multiply it. Because the real formula isn't more money equals more opportunity. It's more awareness equals more opportunity. You don't need capital to start. You need to wake up to the fact that you already have the raw materials of abundance, and God is just waiting for you to move. When I finally understood stewardship, I also realized something deeper, that capital doesn't always mean money. In fact, money is just the result of other kinds of capital that most people never develop. When you don't see these invisible forms of capital, you assume you have nothing to start with. But when you recognize them, you realize that you've been rich all along, just unaware. There are 3 real sources of capital that don't require money. And these are the ones that separate people who wait from people who build. The first source, skill capital. Your skill is the most powerful form of currency you have. When I started out, I didn't have financial capital, but I had skill capital. I knew how to sell, how to talk to people, how to understand what they needed. And even though I wasn't an expert, I practiced until I became one. That's the thing about skill. You don't need to have it to start. You just need to build it daily. And the more you build it, the more valuable you become in any marketplace. Think about it. If you can solve problems for people, you'll never run out of income. People don't pay for your time. They pay for your ability to make their lives easier, better, or more meaningful. So instead of saying, I have no money, ask yourself, what skill can I learn that will make me valuable enough to be paid? That's how capital begins, through competence. When you master a skill, opportunities begin to find you. You start attracting clients, customers, or even partners who want to work with you. You stop chasing money and start creating value. Even the Bible supports this principle. Proverbs 22:29 says, "Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings." That's not poetry, it's a law. Skill opens doors that money can't buy. When I started improving my communication and marketing skills, our bread business grew beyond what I imagined. We started selling nationwide, not because we had money to advertise, but because I learned how to communicate clearly, tell stories, and connect with people online. That's skill capital at work. The second source, relationship capital. If your skills open doors, your relationships determine which rooms you enter. Many people underestimate the power of relationships. They think connections are only for the rich or the influential. But here's the truth. Everyone has connections. The problem is, most people never learn how to cultivate them. You don't need to know everyone. You just need to know the right people who believe in what you're building. Relationships are bridges that can take you where your money can't. When I was starting my business, I didn't have investors, but I had friends and family who supported me, customers who believed in the product, and partners who trusted the vision. That's relationship capital, and it's more powerful than any loan. Sometimes the key to scaling isn't money, it's collaboration. The right partnership can multiply your reach faster than funding ever could. But relationship capital doesn't grow by asking, what can I get? It grows by asking, how can I serve? When you serve people well, whether they're customers, suppliers, or team members, you build trust. And trust becomes the foundation of every thriving business. The billionaire I once met told me something that stuck with me. Your network is not who you know, it's who trusts you. That's the real definition of relationship capital. And if you invest in people genuinely, that trust will one day turn into open doors you never imagined. The third source, faith capital. This is the kind of capital that can't be seen or measured, but it's the most powerful of all. Faith capital is what keeps you moving when everything looks impossible. It's what gives you peace when you have no guarantees. It's believing that if you take one step forward, God will reveal the next. Every great business has this kind of capital at its foundation, the belief that something unseen will manifest through obedience. When I started, I had no proof that my business would work. But I had faith, and faith, when exercised, turns into evidence. The Bible says in Hebrews 11:1, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That means faith is not wishful thinking. It's spiritual capital that turns the invisible into the visible. Faith gives you boldness to start small. It helps you see opportunity where others see emptiness. It allows you to act even when you don't have certainty. When you combine faith with awareness and action, the universe starts responding. You meet the right people at the right time. You find resources you never thought existed. You attract solutions instead of problems. Faith capital is not just about religion. It's about alignment with divine order. It's trusting that abundance is already built into creation and that your job is to walk toward it with confidence. The integration of all three. Here's the beauty. When these three forms of capital come together, financial capital naturally follows. Skill gives you the ability to create value. Relationships expand the reach of that value. Faith gives you the courage to keep going until the value pays off. Money is just the echo of all three working in harmony. That's why I always tell people, if you think you can't start because you have no capital, you've already misunderstood the word capital. Capital doesn't mean cash, it means capacity. And you already have that. Once you develop your capacity, cash becomes a byproduct. So if you're listening to this right now and thinking, I want to start, but I don't know how, here's the truth. You already have what it takes. The question is, will you use it? Because what you call lack today might just be untapped capital waiting for you to see it. The world doesn't reward those who wait for resources. It rewards those who maximize what's already in their hands. If there's one thing I've learned after all the struggles of starting without capital, it's this. Money follows movement, not the other way around. Most people wait for everything to be ready before they move. But the truth is, movement makes things ready. You can pray, plan, and dream all you want, but faith without works is still dead. The first step may feel small, but that's what activates favor. God doesn't bless your waiting. He blesses your working. He blesses your hands in motion, your faith in action, and your willingness to start with what you have. I didn't begin with capital. I began with awareness, faith, and consistency. And that's why it worked. Every sale, every customer, every lesson, it all compounded until what once looked impossible became normal. Because the goal isn't to have everything before you start, it's to grow enough that everything comes as a result of your start. So, if you're listening right now, wondering when to begin, it's now. Don't let the idea of not enough stop you. Your capital is already within you. Use your skill. Build your relationships. Activate your faith. You don't need permission to prosper. You just need obedience to begin. And maybe, just maybe, the thing you've been praying for is already in your hands, waiting for you to believe it's enough.